Welcome to Hash-it-Out, a podcast built by data security experts. We decipher the data security landscape through honest conversations about today's headlines and tomorrow's challenges. Brought to you by Virtru. Let's dive in.
Today, we chat with Adam Healy, CEO of Station 70, and Chris Pierson, CEO of BlackCloak, about the Coinbase data breach and the criticality of digital and physical security measures in cryptocurrency to safeguard both assets and lives.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Howard. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Virtru, and I want to welcome you all to another edition of Hash It Out. Today, we are very fortunate to have two terrific guests talking about a topic that, quite honestly, is just, I feel like it's been there for a long time, but it's just kind of burst onto the scenes of, mainstream media in the past couple of weeks, months, in ways that, rarely has happened in my experience, at least in this industry. We're talking about this idea of wrench attacks increasing as it relates to sort of this, line between sort of digital risk and physical risk really beginning to blur as we speak, when wealthy people with lots of crypto assets are finding them at, no pun intended, the sharp tip of a very sharp spear and facing real risk and bodily harm. And the world is kind of different. And for me today to have this opportunity to talk to Chris Pierson and Adam Healy is really a special, opportunity to kind of put the topic out on the table and get some real expert kind of frontline feedback. So Chris Pierson, CEO of BlackCloak, thank you for being here today. If you don't mind, kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. I'm really pleased that Adam's here, as you know, Matt, and this is going to be great. I'm Chris Pierson, CEO, founder of BlackCloak. BlackCloak is digital executive protection. So we protect corporate executives, board members, other executive leadership team members, and their families in their personal lives. We've all seen a massive increase in both cyber attacks and physical attacks and the kind of convergence of the two in that area. Separately, we also protect high-profile individuals. So it could be sports star, rock star, politician, folks with crypto, folks that are loud about crypto. Once again, protecting them and their families and their personal lives. And it's it's one of those things where that wave is happening right now, and it just continues. So really excited to be here. And past background of many different things, from engineering and hard sciences into legal, into former chief privacy officer and chief information security officer, and a little bit of time as a special government employee on the working at DHS. So it's great to be here, and this will be a great conversation.
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much. Adam, if you don't mind, do the same. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the cool work that you're doing at Station 70.
I'm so equally excited to be here. This is my second Hash It Out, and I think this one is going to be a bit more lively. I think last time it was just me and Matt. So the Adam Healy, CEO, co-founder at Station 70. Really, we're building Station 70 around a lot of experience about the last 8 years in crypto, solving some of the very sticky security problems. Some of our products solve some very complex issues around key management, around disaster recovery, business continuity, some identity problems. And no one else is really solving those in the crypto space. And we think in order to get the industry to where it needs to go, solving those is really a paramount activity. And we've been on this journey for a few years now, and we seem to have built a lot of expertise that now starts to transcend not just key management, but how do you manage keys in these heightened physical security situations that are starting to unfold? And how do you protect organizations and the folks that are not only the executives, but oftentimes the key holders of that crypto, which many times at the more sophisticated firms are not the executives. They're financial operations teams, there's ops teams, there's security teams that are really involved with moving that crypto, and those individuals are very much at risk.
Interesting. Well, one thing I'd love to kind of start off with, I think it was a early May. I can't remember the exact day, but it feels like a lifetime ago. But then again, it feels like it was yesterday. But the world sort of became aware of a breach that happened at Coinbase. And Adam, for the benefit of the audience, can you just summarize from your perspective what happened with that breach, and just kind of TLDR, tell the world what you think?
Yeah, so this is a very good case of third-party risk, and I don't think it was a failure on the side of Coinbase, right? Every firm, more or less, uses third parties, right? Whether it's Gmail or a third-party customer service organization, or it doesn't matter. And in this particular case, Coinbase was using a well-vetted, multi-year vendor, trusted, and frankly trusted by companies beyond just Coinbase, to manage certain activities around customer service. And that necessitated having access to certain customer data. Now, there's some things that we could potentially talk about around, well, how was that data encrypted at rest? How was it encrypted in transit? Did those folks actually need access to that data? And, I think Coinbase would probably argue, not necessarily speaking for them, but, as an outsider, that, yeah, they needed access to certain KYC data, addresses, names, in order to do the customer service job. Well, what that ultimately results in, especially in certain jurisdictions where maybe corruption or bribery is more pronounced, is you now have this treasure trove of data that is readily accessible to large numbers of employees. And those employees may be subjected to corruption, blackmail, extortion, bribery, other types of things, and even physical threats of their family. Now, that's a very hard problem to solve. And something that I think, Coinbase is a world-class security program. And the fact that this was something that happened there just, I think, underscores how hard of a problem this is to solve.
But yeah, there's no doubt. Chris, when you think about what happened with Coinbase, and Adam's words, not mine, treasure trove of personal data like addresses and phone numbers. I mean, let's be clear, nobody's crypto got stolen. But all of that personal information that was, exposed as a result of the coin breach dynamic, how does that then translate into physical risks for high net worth individuals and crypto holders? And what are some of the things that you're thinking about as it relates to BlackCloak, in light of Coinbase?
Yeah, there are a few things here. I mean, Adam very smartly makes the case that, look, there's a lot of risk acceptance that is here in terms of companies have third parties do work on their behalves, and that information has to be made available, right? It's just a basic fundamental need. Every company does it. And in this case, right, that access to that information, just knowing that you're a customer of a bank, of a financial institution, of a wallet, of a cryptocurrency, right? All of that information is useful. It's useful in the hands of cyber criminals and nation state actors. And it's one of the things where we're never, ever going to be able to fully protect that information, right? The euphemistic, we get all the controls in the world on the computers and all the vetting, and nobody can take anything home in the no USB ports. But look, I mean, everyone has a camera or a micro camera that can take pictures of screens and everything else from there. The fact of the matter is that where we really need to go is, what is the usefulness of knowing that this target segment is a client of Coinbase, is a client of a wallet? And that's where well, they obviously have cryptocurrency. They're obviously storing it in this, right, in this company, in this app, in this platform. And it allows you, the cyber criminal, to very, very, right, with specificity, target those individuals. You don't have to have a 100 million person list and guess, okay, everyone might have a Citibank card or Discover card, so we're going to go ahead and send it out there.
Target them physically or target them digitally?
Well, or both. Well, both, right?
Because I would actually add that the digital targeting, it's something that was said a second ago, is like no one lost money. No one lost money through Coinbase, but we do know factually that people have lost money through, I think where Chris is going, targeted phishing, targeted social engineering, because they know that. So there's actually a very large amount of money that has been lost.
Yeah, and so the digital, like your question, right, on the digital versus physical and the discussion therein, you're right, spot on point. Knowing for sure that someone is or was a customer of a specific service or financial institution, or right in this case, a wallet, is powerful information in and of itself, because you can directly message them, target them, maybe have some relevant information. This is regarding your account that was started on January 7th, 2012. And when it was started, you were in Kansas City, and now we know you moved to New York City, but we really need to redo your KYC. So please provide your social security number here, right? You can do that and do it with more meaningful, right, more oomph, and more specificity, which is going to net you a greater return on the back end in terms of people that are scammed, both in terms of potentially their wallet or in terms of just normal identity theft. The second place, and right where Adam was going, is that, look, it also allows you, and of course it allows you to target them in terms of try to hack the wallet and try to grab the crypto. But then it also does set you up for something if, I don't know this, but if you were able to know certain striations of clients in terms of the ones with, I'm going to make this up, over $1 million in some type of cryptocurrency, those that are between 100,000 and $1 million, and those with 100,000 and under, you'd be able to make some type of an educated guess on the value of the assets under management that are included in that wallet, and then target them physically, or just quite honestly, look and see which people are in the high net worth, ultra high net worth areas geographically within a certain country and target them. But it does allow for that convergence between cyber and physical to be there through that information. It's really interesting stuff.
Well, and this is why, like, it was a month ago, Adam, you and I were just going back and forth on LinkedIn, and we were talking about Coinbase. And then it was like a week later, maybe not even a week, the Wall Street Journal comes out front page with this story about the crypto executive in Paris getting abducted and beaten in broad daylight. I mean, I'm not suggesting that there was any correlation at all. Don't get me wrong. But the timing of that is just sort of like, holy crap. I was thinking about, wow, that's a bad breach at Coinbase. There's a bunch of PII out there that's probably going to come back to, haunt someone, no pun intended. But I wasn't thinking it could come back to cause somebody physical harm like we just witnessed in Paris just a couple of weeks ago. Like, what's your 2 cents on that?
It's a good question. I think what we saw in Paris, there's actually been 2 very, very high profile incidents in Paris recently. One was a crypto executive who had a finger cut off while they were trying to get his crypto away from him. The other was actually, it wasn't a crypto employee or somebody in the industry. It was the daughter of a crypto executive that was an attempted kidnapping. So what we've actually seen is threat actors start to transcend just the executives themselves and move to family members, move to other parties that are close to that individual in the with the expectation that they'll be able to extract some type of ransom. So it only seems to be getting worse. Obviously, there was another case recently in New York. There was an issue a couple of years ago in Egypt with an American citizen. This is not a new problem, but it's becoming very, very common. And I think that's where it's starting to make the media. I recently was on Fox and CNN talking about this. They are starting to kind of publicize these issues. And one thing that I can say is kind of an industry insider and someone who is advised on a lot of these security matters at different institutions is it's not just the ones you hear about. I would say there's an equal number of ones that are being handled privately that are not making the media, that don't result in, breaking news CCTV coverage because it's a very dramatic event. So these situations are starting to get taken very, very seriously. And the Coinbase data breach is certainly going to cause an increase in these events. But then we also have to remember this isn't the first time, right? Ledger had a data breach a few years ago with 5 million or so records that were leaked to include home address. HubSpot, a Web2, non-Web3, non-crypto company, had a data breach, 2.5 years ago. And there were 14 crypto companies that were targeted. It was, if you actually read what happened, the threat actor gained access through phishing some credentials from a HubSpot employee and immediately went into HubSpot and basically dumped the entire CRM record for 14 crypto companies, didn't touch anything else, and then left. So this is going to be a bigger and bigger issue as time continues. And I think there's a lot of connectivity between the price of Bitcoin and the attractiveness of threat actors to this problem.
So go ahead, Chris. You guys there?
I'm here.
Right, and they translate it into other forms of monetary valuation. The ability to have, yes, it's an immutable record that is transferred around, but the ability to potentially get it to exit nodes, to go ahead and move around KYC and AML sanctions and all the rest, right? It makes it even more attractive because it's an actual asset that you can go ahead and transform into something else. It's like cryptocurrency has revolutionized the ransomware market, whereas before it used to be that you had to go ahead and send money and items into like a a Western Union or some other physical place, which of course has cameras and other requirements. So it wasn't as attractive to cyber criminals. Cryptocurrency really has allowed cyber criminals to be able to egress their ill-gotten gains and convert it, which is really the hardest part, convert it into other forms of assets. And so it's even more attractive. I totally agree with Adam, but it's even more attractive just because of its ability to move around the world at kind of light speed.
So the one thing I would caveat with that, because I am a slightly biased crypto person, is the amount of malicious activity that crypto is used for is a fraction of the amount of malicious activity that the dollar is used for. There's far more money laundering and extortion and other types of nefarious activity with fiat, national currencies than there is crypto, obviously, because there's a lot more of those in circulation globally. But you are spot on. It does make the ability to move funds without KYC, without AML, PSA subjected to things like that. It does make it a good bit easier, but through the threat actor's lens, you're still going to take a loss, right? Laundering money through crypto is different than laundering money in a kind of legacy context, but you can still launder it either way.
Well, this is the thing I wanted to ask both of you. I'm not nearly as close to this as you guys are, but I certainly, pay attention to the game, so to speak, and have invested myself in crypto, but not enough that anybody would want to hopefully kill me.
You should say that one more time and just be very clear about it.
Hopefully nobody wants to kill me. I guess the question is, there's this irony which strikes me, which is that many crypto holders, observing the risk in the world, have moved to cold wallets to avoid this idea of digital hacking and theft. But at the same time, as we're now sort of talking about, that move to cold wallets, which was designed to minimize digital risk, has increased exponentially. Maybe that's overstating it. The idea of physical risk. Is that wrong? Is that right? And then more specifically, Chris, first you, how do you advise clients on this idea of balancing digital versus physical safety when this is the world we're living in?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question. It's one we get a lot, and it's one where we see the nexus, we see the convergence of the two, right? When you're talking about protecting, let's just say at the essence, you want to protect yourself, your family, your way of life, money, all the rest of these things. You really have to start with privacy, right? How are you protecting where you are in terms of your location? A lot of that is removal from data broker websites, kind of the 411 or Zeta search or whitepages.com. Now, that was all great advice and guidance up until really about August of 2024. Once you have one of the largest data brokers, National Public Data, NPD, have a breach and have records, it was over 300 million records, but on 270 unique Americans. But once you have that treasure trove out there of every address, every phone number, every email address, and your social security number, and your date of birth out there, it is 100% immutable. It cannot be removed from the deep web, dark web. It is there. So it's one of the things where no matter what, a cyber criminal who's on the dark web can go ahead and grab that data store and find out where you are. So it's absolutely now less possible to remain anonymous for almost everyone in the United States. Obviously, over time, decades, that information will burn down and become less useful, but it's going to take decades. So what you really have to do, back to the top, right? Understand what that footprint is of your digital footprint. Shrink it down as much as you can. Data broker removal, yes. Sharing information, sharing on social media, sharing and publicizing where you are, location, and things like that in different settings. These are things that you have to really pay attention to. Second, you're going to need to pay attention to the cybersecurity of your actual devices, cell phone, tablet, computer, and your phone number, right? A lot of wallets are still, and a lot of people are still using phone number SMS-based authentication in and around cryptocurrency, right? Just in and around it, right? There are nuances between different services, all the rest, but still using that. That's an extraordinarily highly compromisable means of authenticating your account using, right, an actual authenticator or some type of YubiKey, physical key, pass key, or, right, and well, that plus having a cold wallet is probably where you need to be. But you got to really advise on privacy, shrink it down for you and your family members. If you got a family of 4 and you only do it for one person, it kind of doesn't matter. It's like It's like if only one person gets a flu shot and someone gets a flu at Thanksgiving, doesn't matter that, right? One person got a flu shot, everyone's going to be basically walking away with the flu. So you got to inoculate yourself there and really shrink that attack surface. Watch what you're doing in terms of social media and all the rest. Watch how you're protecting your devices and accounts, right? And accounts. And it may be something where people say, well, look, I was protecting my account. Well, but did you protect the email that actually is associated with the account, where you have the initial keys, initial implementation, initial setup, and you can get a lot of great information from that, and it'll probably allow for an attack to be more successful, especially a human engineering attack. So you have to do those and think about those layers. And then, of course, look, the fact of the matter is you are going to know the value or worth of what you have in your wallet. And if it's $1 million, if it's 10 million, if it's 20 million, if it's whatever, you know your assets under management. If you're entering a place where you are an attractive target, you need to take some measures, some steps to actually protect you and your loved ones from a physical security perspective, right? The old guns guards gates, yeah, it still rings true in terms of how you trim the bushes, lighting, cameras, passcodes, different ways of coming in, who's in your house, do you have cleaning services coming in, how you're doing construction, all the rest of those types of things are important. They're right, necessary. They're not sufficient in terms of covering off this risk. You'd have to do a few other things, change up pattern of life, not getting the same coffee down the road in New York City that you always go to each and every morning. All of these are things that do require some consulting, some analysis, some risk assessment on the physical side, not just digital. And that's right, is really the convergence now.
Interesting. Sobering for sure. Adam, what's your take?
I probably couldn't have said that better myself. And I think Chris did a good job of covering the A through Z list of things. What I would say is we have to, a lot of times in the cybersecurity context, we use the term assume breach, right? If we assume there's a data breach, here's how we protect our data, here's how we protect our systems, layers of defenses, et cetera. And I think the way Chris laid it out is very accurate in terms of how do you layer those digital defenses and then also those physical defenses. And varying pattern of life. One of the things that we preach, in part and parcel to that, to folks that we're advising or executives that we know, is just general situational awareness. Where are you going? When are you going there? Or is your head down on your phone as you're walking through the parking lot? Make yourself look like less of a victim. A good friend of mine used to always talk about, if you go to the Great Plains of Africa and you look at the prey, all the prey have their heads down and are looking, eating the grass, and their heads are down. It looks a lot like a human on a phone walking through a dark parking lot. What do all the predators look like, right? All the predators have their eyes up, they're looking around, they're seeing what's going on, they're using their binocular vision, and they're aware of their surroundings. A lot of times, to avoid becoming a victim, you just have to not look like a victim. And having that situational awareness is something that we've been preaching a lot, because the reality is, not everyone is able, or not everyone's company is willing to fund executive protection and home security audits and all of these things that the kind of upper echelon of those within crypto do on a regular basis. So it's up to you to keep yourself and your family safe. It starts with that digital side, keeping your address, your phone number, those things less accessible. To Chris's point, it'll never be totally inaccessible because of the breaches that have happened. But how do you make it less accessible? And then how do you build those layered physical defenses? I think the sad reality, I hate to be the doomsday person on this particular discussion, but the sad reality is that if you're targeted by a even moderately sophisticated bad actor, you're probably going to have a really bad experience without a lot of rigor to build that insulation around you, because most folks are just simply not able to isolate their data and build those layered physical defenses to prevent against even a moderately sophisticated bad actor.
So my question to both of you is kind of this. I mean, again, I've been in this industry for 20, 25 years. I've been to, 15 RSAs. I know that both of you have done the same. And sometimes I just feel like we're all on a treadmill and we're working really hard to minimize risk and theft and bad things from happening. And I don't know how successful we're being, like collectively as an industry? Are we really moving the needle, or are we just kind of like slowly walking backwards on a treadmill and going nowhere? I guess my question to both of you is this, again, not being sort of like the doomsday or just negative, but how much of what we're seeing right now with all of this that we're talking about is really new versus like this is just the same old that's been out there for decades and decades? You talked about, Adam, you talked about, what's happening with crypto in the margins of nefarious stuff is a fraction of what's happening with fiat currency. And so is it another way of saying, well, what's happening today with respect to bad actors doing bad things around crypto and the blurring of the line between physical and digital risk is just people being bad? I mean, is it the world really changed, or is this just more of the same?
I think the big difference here, and this is an analogy that I've used a few times now, is let's say you were looking to rob someone 15 or 20 years ago, right? You could potentially get the amount of money they had at their home, which was probably not a lot in cash. You might be able to convince them to do an ATM withdrawal if you take them to an ATM, but most banks are, $200, $400, $500, $600 is the max you can withdraw. You could rob a bank. You could risk a silent alarm, getting into a shootout with the police. Banks don't have a lot of money in them anyways. You could, maybe a couple $100,000. You could rob a convenience store, considerably less and maybe even a higher risk profile than robbing a bank. Now you can rob a soft target, a human, right? A human is probably the weakest link in this entire situation because, you use the wrench attack metaphor, and, it's, for those that are uninitiated to that metaphor, it's essentially, I don't have to beat the safe or the vault or the locks. I just have to hit you with a wrench enough times until you give me the code to it. And, so now you have this paradigm where you can directly target the human that has access to those assets. And what we have to remember is that hardware wallet, that mnemonic that you have in your head, those 12 words that you have in your head, which allow you to restore a wallet, that passphrase that's written down at home, that's a bearer instrument. And that bearer instrument gives you access to potentially millions of dollars. So now, from the eyes of a bad guy, the risk versus reward kind of calculus, it's a lot easier to potentially get a big payday by just going after that really soft target.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how Adam puts that, and I think there are two different parts to your question, Matt. One is on the hey, where are we at overall in terms of kind of the attacks, controls, and all the rest, and then the second is worthwhile to spend some time on. Really at the end of the day, in order to go ahead and get all of somebody's assets or a significant amount of somebody's assets, to Adam's point, you have to kind of kidnap them, bring them to the bank, and the bank is the one in control of the actual safe, deposit box, the access and all the rest. It's that third party. It's like, I don't have access into the vault. You got to go rob the bank and put on explosives and do some type of George Clooney and Matt Damon magic and all the rest. And what wallets and the introduction of crypto have really done there is actually diversified that and spread those bank vaults out to your phones, your devices. Everything is within your control. Everything. Access into your account is within your control. Access to, if you're doing a best practice and you have an encrypted password vault, is in your control. Unlocking your phone, the biometrics there, within your control. Knowing the secret passphrase and all the rest in your control. And if you have a cold wallet, it's inside the safe. That's literally the passcode that once again, in your control. So none of those types of facts are going to defend against whether it's cold wallet, warm wallet, hot wallet, stored on the phone, not stored on the phone, dual factor authentication, YubiKey. Like, you are the individual that can compromise or give up access to everything. And it's really, really interesting because that means that you are the person to attack either digitally or physically, right? There is nobody else to attack there. It's you. So that's first and foremost. Second, just overall in terms of making yourself a harder target to hit and kind of making things a little more complicated, right? As an industry, really need to, look, let's get rid of SMS authentication on any and all wallets and crypto and all the rest. It's just simply not something that's acceptable. Let's mandate that it be an authenticator or perhaps some other type of key. Let's also put in controls on the back end so that you have to have a double, triple verification system to actually do the movement in some form or fashion. I'm not saying that, I haven't seen these before, that some people don't have, but Like, are we doing something? It's like with Apple's iPhone. If you turn on stolen device protection, right? It used to be that you could, right, you put something in someone's drink, or you see what their code was at the bar, and you go ahead and you replicate it. They're a little bit tipsy, and then you steal their phone. You walk down the road, you put in the same, digits that you saw. Well, you could get away with whatever's on their phone and the access to whatever's on their phone. Now with stolen device protection, it makes it a little bit harder, because even if you do enter in that 6-digit code, 4-digit code that you shoulder surfed and then stole a phone on, if you turn it on, when you change your distance, when you change your geography, it may prompt for that face scan, for that biometric. And so once again, third parties have stepped in here to try to increase the level of controls, increase the friction when there are major items, major events that are happening on that device. I think this is one that's going to be solved through, or it's going to be mitigated or better solved through education at the wallets and crypto and that whole area. Some changes in terms of increased friction of, right, let's get rid of SMS. Let's get rid of some of the low-hanging fruit there. Let's make sure that we're comparing hashed passwords, so we can make sure they weren't on a dark web data breach type of list. Let's do some of those things and do them for the client. Second, let's make sure that we make people aware of different things that they can or should be doing. And then we're going to have to mix into it the fact that at the end of the day, compromising an individual or a family member there is actually something that can compromise that entire vault, and think that through really, really carefully. I mean, it's just it's really a changed, migrated, kind of risk dynamic is what we're talking about.
I would add one thing to that. So everything Chris said around the other, like a third party having controls that help you minimize your risk, that is very true in the crypto industry for custodial accounts. So if you're using Coinbase, if you're using Kraken, you're using BitGo, you're using OKX, you're using custodial accounts, they're using Auth0, they have breach password detection, they force hardware type, passkeys or YubiKeys is the primary, and then it's like a really difficult process to get to SMS, and like it's only like after you click I accept this risk 13 times. So like there's a lot of, I would actually say much better security controls around those services that are custodial than you would find at most banks, especially most regional banks. And for Coinbase is a good example, right? They have volume and velocity limits. If you've updated your wallet allow list recently, then you have 72 hours before you can transfer funds out. And like there's a lot of sophistication around ATO, account takeover, around fraud detection. But it's when you get into those self-custody assets, right? You have the hardware wallet at your house, you have the paper wallet, you have MetaMask in your browser. Now there's no third party that acts as an additional control buffer. And it really is, for lack of a better term, the lawyers don't like this when I say this, but you are your own bank in those cases when you're doing self-custody. Right. So those are the cases that I think where folks have the most risk. And the paradox there is kind of unfortunate, which is you've all probably heard the not your keys, not your crypto, right? Which is basically a call to action to self-custody. Well, a lot of your OG crypto folks, a lot of your folks that have been around a while, they really adhere to that ethos. Now you've just created this different, you've traded one set of risks for a different set of risks. And now that's where we are with all of these physical attacks happening.
I mean, it's literally insane, but the fact that we're having this conversation, and just a small little anecdote, I just recently had a kid graduate college. There was some money left over in their 50 whatever account, and I wanted to move the money from that account to my youngest, who's now in college, to help pay for their college. And the process of doing that with the bank was so unbelievably painful, and the regulatory, the security, just and look, it's my money. I should be able to move it, but yet it was months in the making, and there's a long drawn out story there I won't bore you with. But never did I think for a second I'd be better off with that money stuffed under my mattress. And that's exactly where we are, to a certain extent, where everybody is their own bank. Let's stuff our crypto under our mattress and hope that things, are better off in that context, because not my keys, not my crypto is the ethos. I don't know. I mean, maybe the world's going to change and come off of that because of what we're now seeing. I don't know, but
this is actually one of the problems that so at Station 70, we built some institutional products. That was our first set of products that we launched around key security, key management. This summer, we're actually releasing a new app that has some like duress protocols, panic protocols built in. It's not a wallet, but it's a security wrapper that you can integrate to any of your self-custody wallets. Because again, no one's really built some of these security tools that we would take for granted, using your example, in the traditional finance sense, where, yeah, it might be high friction, but like it definitely was safe probably when you transferred that balance. Like it happened and it worked.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Well, we are running up on time. I have one final question for the two of you. And again, I want to thank you both for being here. It's just incredibly interesting timing, and you guys are both world-class experts. So grateful to have this chat. I want to know, what do you think about going forward? Like, if you had, as you think about the world today and you think about the next, I don't know, 6 months seems like a lifetime, but maybe next 6 to 12 months, what do you think the world looks like 6 to 12 months from now? And do you think that there's an opportunity for us to collectively take, the advice, for example, something Chris offered, like, let's just not support multi-factor authentication via SMS text. Don't do that. That's stupid. Like, how much can we move the needle between now and a year to kind of change the equation and maybe like authentically improve the quality of security and privacy and protection for people, who happen to be owning these assets?
I mean, there's a multitude of things. Let's separate things out here. So first of all, you have a large number of venture capital funds that have backed, let's just call folks in crypto, whether it's wallets or crypto, it doesn't matter, right? That have backed folks in that ecosystem. Many of those individuals and those firms are being and have been targeted. So we need to really think about what's right for that ecosystem in terms of maybe turning it down a notch, being more aware. Second, we need to talk about the folks that are actually executives at cryptocurrency, wallet institutions, or associated with it, right? Anywhere that there's a chain there that are associated, and what's right for them, just basically being in the mix. And then, of course, so the third area, Matthew, as you mentioned, the actual users of, customers of, and let's dive in there a little bit. I think there are a lot of things that need to be done. There needs to be increased education that is simple, easy to understand in terms of best practices, number one. Something that's very, very short. We're talking 60 to 90 seconds. People aren't going to pay attention to more than that. Second, we need to really, really fundamentally change how access works, and to any of the vaults, to any of the wallets, to any of the crypto, and doing things like turning off SMS abilities, like absolutely part of the mix. Perhaps proving, right, that your password, the current one you're using, is not something that has been hashed before on dark web, deep web treasure troves, is interesting. Making sure perhaps that, right, you have to have, right, IP addresses logged in and lack of variance there, so they know where you're traveling or where you are at, and take people off of VPNs, so that you actually have a one-to-one. There's a whole bunch of essentially identity theft red flag rules, types of things that you can do that are implemented right now for credit card transactions, stepped up authentication, and all the rest. But if we can slow down time a little bit through controls, right, not to such a high friction level, but through controls there, I think we're going to be better off in terms of actual users. I do think that there's a responsibility that many companies do have in terms of the education there, especially as it relates to, hey, it's your fingerprint that's being used. Here are some of the risks. It's your cold storage, and here's some of the risks. Put this in your safe, and then what are the risks associated with that? But then we got to bring our family members along too, right? It's not just about us, it's about the entire family. And it's about making sure that, quite honestly, if you're one of the people that has a large amount of assets under management that are involved in this area, you're quiet about it. You're not out there, right? You're not out there thinking about it. I think there was a story where Mark Cuban had lost some $900,000 in some type of a crypto scam. I mean, look, guys, we can turn this down. We don't have to announce, right, to everyone what we're doing in this space and help make us a bigger target. But there's a lot there. I just think we really need to get the conversation started. And then we're going to come up with the right types of controls. Some of the ones I mentioned may be good, may be valid. They may be things that add too much friction, but we should really, really sit down and have a conversation on this.
Okay, last thing, Adam, is part of the answer what's happening now within Washington and the Trump administration, and sort of the idea that crypto becoming, I'll call it, normalized from a regulatory perspective? I mean, is the world better off when banks are when MasterCard, I'm making this up, but when MasterCard and Capital One are in the crypto business, does the world get better? I mean, or not?
That's of course, you got to give me this regulatory overlaid question. I don't know if it gets better.
Well, listen, a lot of people in Washington right now with the current administration are talking about crypto. That's all I'll say.
I know. I've been to a few of these events. I think, I don't know if it gets better, right? I think that there's a lot that could be done around Bitcoin in broader financial industry, financial services. I don't know that the government should be involved, but we have to remember that Bitcoin was started as a direct reaction to the 2008 crisis that unfolded, right? The Genesis block of Bitcoin has enshrined in it a counterpoint to the headline, and I forget it all right now, but basically around the banks getting bailed out again, right? And I think we have to think about that. I don't know that it gets better. I think that there's a lot that could be done around stable coins. There's a lot of people in DC talking about stable coins. I think that helps things get better, right? If we think non-Bitcoins, like let's talk stable coins that are US dollar denominated, that's a very good way for us to export soft power to areas of the world that want to transact in dollars without having to hold dollars or have US bank accounts. So I think that could be better. I'm a bit dubious on the Bitcoin strategic reserve thing. I don't know how I necessarily feel about that. I'm probably leaning more towards not supporting that. So we'll see how this stuff plays out, but I definitely think there's something around soft power projection with stable coins denominated in dollars.
Wow. Well, that was a fun 45 minutes. I really appreciate the two of you for being here today. And I hope that anyone who has the opportunity to watch and listen to this particular episode of Hash It Out, learn something. I know I did for sure. And thank you both for being here.
Thank you. It's great conversation, great debate, and look, really, really timely and important.
Yeah, glad to be here. Appreciate we got this together.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review and don't miss us the next time we hash it out. Like, follow, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, all linked below.